And then John decides to do a act with him, saying, what if I do this? Right? This isn't illegal, right?
John Jones decides to just do a act with this man from the commission that happens to be in his locker room in front of Big John McCarthy.
How about the other guy that's trying to help John Jones, a part of the commission that's there to help John not only understand the rules, but also prepare him for any new rule changes or anything like that? John just taking advantage of the situation. Hey, let me play a practical joke by...
But I mean, she's bleeding from the nose and mouth. She's down with us while the male is up at the room. And he's actually a professional MMA fighter, Jonathan Jones.
I have a very firm stance, obviously, like any other normal person does, about a man hitting a woman. We don't know the details, but apparently she was covered in blood and all the rest of it.
One of the worst details, for those who haven't heard the report, is that it was the child who said to the hotel staff, "Can you phone the police?"
John Bones Jones, one of the most dominant and controversial figures in MMA history. From championship glory to multiple run-ins with the law, his legacy has been anything but simple. But now, serious new allegations have emerged that could further tarnish his already complex reputation.
I got the Hall of Fame tonight, and then you're gonna put me on this by walking down the street.
Recently, John McCarthy came out and talked about an incident that took place in John Jones's locker room. According to McCarthy, Jones was in high spirits, joking and bouncing around when he called him over and said, "I've got a question for you." Jones then asked for a volunteer. A black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu who was working with the Athletic Commission stepped up to help. The man, seemingly excited to be there and eager to participate, was asked by John to assume a ground guard position. McCarthy went on to say that Jones then proceeded to simulate a sexual act with the man while he was on the ground.
But when I went into John's locker room, he's bouncing around, he's having a good time, and he said, "I got a question for you. I said, "Yeah, what's your question?" And he says, I need somebody. And there's an individual there, and that individual was a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and was working for the commission. And he says, "Is someone getting on the ground for me?" Right? And so this guy, being a ground guy and being someone that was, man, I'm in John Jones's locker room. This is great. And so he says, "Oh, I'll do it for you." He says, I know how to roll. And so he goes down. He says, just put me in guard, right? And then John decides to do a sexual act with him.
McCarthy went on and explained how John Jones rudely began asking, "What if I do this?" after simulating the act. The Athletic Commission member, who had volunteered to get on the ground, looked visibly shocked and uncomfortable. Realizing the situation had escalated, McCarthy immediately told Jones to knock it off and help the man back to his feet. Jones claimed he was just joking, but continued to push the issue, asking what consequences there could be. McCarthy responded firmly, saying he could disqualify him for unsportsmanlike conduct.
Saying, what if I do this? Right? This isn't illegal, right? And the guy who was on the ground, quickly his eyes went, as big as they could get. Like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "John, knock it off," right? And I helped the person up, and he goes, "I'm just joking." And he goes, "But really, what could you do?" I said, "I could disqualify you for being unsportsmanlike. Go ahead and do it. Let's see what happens." This is why John and I never really got along.
Josh Thompson, McCarthy's co-host, added that the situation would have been different if Jones had been joking around with a close friend. He explained that it's one thing to mess around with a buddy in private, but entirely different to do something like that to a random person, especially a commissioner, a fan, or someone working backstage like an usher. Thompson emphasized that Jones had never even met the man before, which made the act far more inappropriate.
I could see if he did that like with a buddy of his, like goofing around in the back. It's different than some random commissioner in the back, a random fan, a random person who's working as an usher or something like that. You're like, "Yeah, get down here," and then you do it to some person you've never met before.
MMA Guru also reacted to this news. He criticized John Jones for his actions, pointing out that he chose to perform a non-consensual act with the Athletic Commission member in his locker room. He emphasized that Jones even did this in front of a UFC official, Big John McCarthy, who was working as a referee at the time. MMA Guru sarcastically pointed out that Jones seemed more concerned with whether it was illegal, asking, "What if I do this? Is this illegal?" He made it clear that in his view, the only thing keeping Jones in check is the law, implying that without it, Jones might have crossed even further boundaries.
John Jones decides to just do a act with this man from the commission that happens to be in his locker room in front of Big John McCarthy.
Saying, what if I do this? Right? This isn't illegal, right?
This isn't illegal, right? John Jones, it's good to know that he's following the words of the law. That's the only thing holding Jones back, honestly, at some point.
MMA Guru continued, drawing a comparison between John Jones and figures like P. Diddy, who is also currently under investigation for trafficking and. He pointed out that, like Diddy, Jones recognizes when people are starstruck and vulnerable. In this case, the Athletic Commission member, who was likely in awe of being around Jones, found himself in a situation where Jones took advantage of that vulnerability. The commission member had been asked by Jones to help demonstrate a move for McCarthy under the pretext of asking if it was legal to do this in the cage to his opponent. But instead, Jones chose to perform a non-consensual act.
So he's starstruck by John Jones. And this is when these types of people pounce. When they notice that you're starstruck. When P. Diddy sees that look in your eye like, holy shit, this guy's hyped up to be around P. Diddy. He'll do anything. This is when these types of people pounce. Okay? This is P. Diddy stuff. This is John Jones stuff. So this poor Athletic Commission member is backstage in the locker room with John Jones for whatever reason. And he's been brought along as an example to display some kind of move that John Jones wants to show Big John McCarthy to see if it's okay.
Wade from the Wade Concept channel also reacted to the situation, criticizing John Jones for his behavior. He explained that the Athletic Commission member was there to help Jones understand the rules and stay informed about any updates, not to be put in a humiliating situation. Wade described how Jones took advantage of the moment to play what he called a practical joke by dry humping the man on the ground and simulating through physical thrusts. Wade didn't hold back, calling Jones a weirdo and a terrible representation of the sport.
How about the other guy that's trying to help John Jones, a part of the commission that's there to help John not only understand the rules, but also prepare him for any new rule changes or anything like that? John just taking advantage of the situation. Hey, let me play a practical joke by dry humping this guy on the ground, by simulating, by grabbing him and thrusting into him. Sorry, I'm using language because that's what the guy did. He's a weirdo and a terrible representation of the sport.
Wade went on to mention that part of the clip the public didn't get to see involved Greg Jackson, John Jones's head coach, coming over to apologize, not just to the Athletic Commission member, but also to Big John McCarthy. Jackson reportedly said something along the lines of, "Hey, sorry, John. He shouldn't have done that." Wade compared it to a parent apologizing for a misbehaving child at school, emphasizing how absurd it was that a grown man like Jones needed his coach to smooth things over for such inappropriate behavior. He underscored that this wasn't just immaturity, and it was a disturbing reflection of how Jones continues to be enabled by those around him.
Part of this clip we didn't get to see was Greg Jackson coming over and apologizing to the guy and to John McCarthy. He's like, hey, sorry, John shouldn't have done that. His own head coach has to come over, like John's father has to go over and apologize for a bad kid at school. He's a grown man acting like this.
Move over. MMA Guru voiced his frustrations, pointing out how bizarre it was that this situation wasn't getting more attention. He asked why nothing was being made of it, noting that if the same story came out in any other sport, it would be massive news. He compared it to how something as trivial as Karl Anthony Towns sneezing or Anthony Edwards tripping would go viral on Twitter, yet John Jones performing sexual acts on male members of the Athletic Commission backstage before his fights gets almost no coverage. He emphasized that UFC referee Big John McCarthy had shared this information, but the MMA media seemed to be silent about it, which he found deeply troubling.
Why is nothing being made of this? This, in any other sport, would be the craziest news ever. This, in any other... NBA news comes out, fucking Karl Anthony Towns fucking sneezed the other day. He sneezed. Everyone, did you hear about him sneezing? And that goes viral on Twitter. Did you see how Anthony Edwards, he tripped over? John Jones performing sexual acts on male members of the Athletic Commission backstage before his fights. UFC referee Big John McCarthy telling you this information. Crickets! from the MMA media.
MMA Guru continued, clarifying that this wasn't something that happened recently, but rather something Jon Jones did during one of his older fights. He started questioning how much more has been swept under the rug and how much longer Jones is going to get special treatment from Dana White and the UFC. MMA Guru expressed his disbelief that such serious allegations, especially when shared by a respected figure like Big John McCarthy, could be ignored by the MMA community. He wondered how many other instances of misconduct had been overlooked in the name of protecting Jones and his career.
Is it a sexual act that Jon Jones is committing on a man who had no idea it was about to go down in front of Big John, and then, knock it off, John, and then the guy on the floor goes, oh my God, what is Jon Jones doing to me right now? This is crazy. How much more has been swept under the rug? Would this explain the favoritism of Jon Jones? If these are the stories we're just hearing about, what stories would come out if there was some kind of investigation done?
MMA Guru even highlighted how Jon Jones's coach, Greg Jackson, was forced to approach Big John McCarthy after the incident and apologize. He explained how Jackson told McCarthy, "I'm sorry you had to see that, man. I'm sorry he did that in front of you." According to MMA Guru, Jackson made it clear that this wasn't just a harmless situation like an oil check or a fish hook, but something much more serious. He criticized how Jackson was essentially apologizing for Jones's behavior as if it were a regular occurrence, saying things like, "I'm sorry, Big John, but you just can't take him anywhere without him doing something like that." The tone was one of disbelief, as MMA Guru pointed out the disturbing pattern of Jones's behavior being excused by those around him.
Like Greg Jackson, the coach of Jon Jones, the handler of Jon Jones, is having to come up to Big John and saying, "Listen, buddy, I'm sorry you had to see that, man. I'm sorry that he did that in front of you." Like, he's having to apologize. So this is not a fish hook. Or no, not a fish hook. This is not an oil check, man. This is not an oil check. Someone's having to come over to Big John and say, "I'm sorry he did that." And also, Greg Jackson is walking up to Big John and apologizing for Jon Jones's behavior. Like, this is a regular thing. "I'm sorry about that, Big John. I'm sorry, buddy. Yeah, just can't take him anywhere without him just some guy, so I'm sorry you had to see that, bud."
This is not the first time Jon Jones has faced accusations of sexual misconduct. In a prior incident at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, Jones was reported for assaulting his fiancée. The situation escalated to the point where one of their children reportedly went to hotel security and asked them to call the police. The incident drew widespread criticism, not only for the alleged assault, but also for the emotional toll it appeared to take on Jones's family. Despite the seriousness of the allegations, Jones once again managed to avoid significant professional consequences, raising further concerns about the UFC's handling of his repeated off-the-cage behavior.
We've got a possible DV call, domestic violence call. Female is bleeding from the nose and mouth, but I mean, she's bleeding from the nose and mouth. She's down with us while the male is up at the room, and he's actually a professional MMA fighter, Jonathan Jones.
Michael Bisping also criticized Jon Jones, taking a firm stance on the previous domestic violence incident involving Jones and his fiancée. While acknowledging that the full details weren't publicly known, Bisping pointed out that reports described the woman as being covered in blood. One of the most disturbing aspects he noted was that it was Jones's own child who went to hotel staff and asked them to call the police. Bisping emphasized how serious the situation must have been for a child to take that step, calling it one of the most troubling parts of the entire report.
I have a very firm stance, obviously, like everyone, like any other normal person does, about a man hitting a woman. We don't know the details, but apparently she was covered in blood and all the rest of it.
One of the worst details for those who haven't heard the report is that it was the child who said to the hotel staff, "Can you phone the police?" And when your own child is ringing the police on you, basically, I mean, that's the worst it can get, really, isn't it?
Michael Bisping also highlighted Jon Jones's long-standing issues with substance abuse. He mentioned that Jones has a history of drinking heavily and allegedly using drugs, suggesting that his behavior during these incidents could have been influenced by being in an altered state. Bisping clarified that he wasn't making excuses for Jones, but spoke from personal experience, explaining that being blacked out can lead to a complete loss of control. He emphasized that Jones himself has admitted to having substance abuse problems and stressed that at this point in his life, with a partner and children to care for, it's critical for Jones to finally take responsibility and get help.
You know, he likes a lot of booze and he likes a bit of Charlie. Do you know what I mean? So I'm assuming he came back I don't know. Allegedly, I'm assuming he
No,
came
it's
back.
for. I mean, let's be honest. He's admitted it
let's be
multiple
honest.
times.
He's out of his headbutting fucking police cars.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? I'm not proud of it, but I've fucking been there. Do you know what I mean? You don't know what you're doing, right? You lost. I'm talking about when I was a kid. You know, you're blacked out. You don't know what the fuck is going on. By the way, I am not making excuses for him. What I'm saying is the guy, and he even came out and said it. You know, he has substance abuse issues. He's got to take care of that because number one, he's got a wife and a family. Not his wife, but still, he's got a partner and he's got kids to take care of.
Josh Thompson also weighed in, stating that while he doesn't want to take away from Jon Jones's undeniable talent and fight IQ, there will always be a question mark or an asterisk next to Jones's name because of his history with performance-enhancing drugs. Thompson pointed out that after the picogram controversy, when trace amounts of banned substances were found in Jones's system, there was a noticeable shift in his performances. He noted that Jones's fights became significantly closer after that, referencing his bouts against Thiago Santos, Anthony Smith, and Dominic Reyes as examples where Jones no longer appeared as dominant as he once did.
Like I said, I don't want to take away from his abilities to be in terms of fight IQ and his talents. That's definitely there. But like I said, for me, there will always be a question mark or an asterisk next to his name because of the steroids. Because I also look at it too. Once the picograms had been discovered, have you noticed that his fights became a lot closer after that? His fights with Santos, his fights with Anthony Smith, his fights with Dominic Reyes, all of his fights were closer after that.
Jon Jones is often celebrated as one of the most gifted fighters to ever step into the octagon, but as we've explored, his legacy is surrounded by controversy. How far does the UFC's protection of Jon Jones go, and at what cost to the sport's integrity? For many, regardless of his record or skill, there will always be an asterisk next to his name. Let us know down in the comments what you think about this, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.